Your task is simple and yet not so simple. White to play and get a draw. Somehow you have to stop black from promoting one of these pawns to another queen. Before I tell you what the solution is, can you find the only move that saves the position for white? All right, well, if you had a chance to look at that, the first thing you need to understand is you have to give a check. Because if you do anything that's not check, for example, some random move like this, black simply gets a second queen, and now you have two queens to deal with. You're not going to be able to come back from this, right? So you do have to keep black in check, which means 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. These are your only options. You have to play one of these 5 moves, but only one of them saves the game and the other 4 lose. So let's start with the most obvious one. Queen takes b3. This is not the correct move, by the way. I'll just go ahead and tell you. The correct move is knight to c5. This is the only one. But let's see if we can understand why. If you start by taking here with the queen, it looks pretty good because you get a check. Now you're threatening to maybe take another pawn. But black is simply going to play king to d2. You don't have time to take this because they get the queen. So you have to keep checking. But if you look carefully, there's not a lot of checks. You can't go there, which means you have to play queen to b4 check. Then the king just slides over. And again, black is threatening to get the queen. So you could throw in a check. Now he's just going to run to b1 and hide somewhere over here. And you have no way to keep checking. For example, if you go here, king to a2, check, king to a1, and next move he's going to get a queen. How are you going to stop it, right? I guess you could pin the pawn, but that doesn't really help you because this guy's coming out now and something like queen d5, he's threatening this, and he's threatening this, and this, and this, and it's over. It's over, okay? So that's kind of the problem with the obvious queen takes b3. Now, the other queen moves are similar. So we'll just maybe look at one of them. Let's just say queen b5 because they both go on the same diagonal here. But what black's going to do here is, again, kind of make a beeline for over here and try to hide somewhere on these squares, right? And there's not really much that you can do. Check. He's going to run over here. And how do you, I mean, you're just going to do this, get a queen. Okay? So that basically means we have to use the knight. But how do you know knight c5 instead of knight to e5? Well, let's see what's wrong with knight to e5 check. So on knight to e5, the king is going to go back to c2, and it's kind of the same plan. He's going to run over here, and the knight is too far away to do anything. Okay, for example, queen check, let's just say the king runs. Maybe you take this, and then simply like queen g2, because he's not in check, and he just moves the queen. He's threatening this, and you can't do anything. Okay, and the knight's too far, like I said, to actually do anything useful. So because of that, going all the way back to the beginning, the only move is knight to c5 check, because now your knight can play a role in this area of the board, which you're going to see in just a second. So black actually has a couple of things that they could do. First of all, let's start with king to c2, thinking they can maybe do the same thing. It doesn't work because now you take with check, and when the king tries to run, check, and it depends on where you go. Let's say you go to a1. Do you see what white can do here? That's correct. You can grab the pawn first, and then after the king moves, you just basically keep going back and forth, and there's no way for the king to get away from it. You could actually lose the game if you go there. You get checkmated. So you could go here, but then there's queen b3 check, and then there's queen d3 check, and it's just perpetual check, okay? So going back here, let's say you played king to a2, defending your pawn on a3, but that doesn't really help you because the knight, notice, is supporting the queen now, and you can just keep checking, right? If you go here, you take the pawn. If you go here, then there's check here, right? And it's, again, you can't ever go to c1 because it's checkmate. Okay, so now you can see why the knight coming over here is more valuable for white. Okay, but black has a trick. Okay, so going back to the beginning, knight to c5, instead of going this way, black says, okay, I'm going to go king to d2 instead. And before I tell you what the reason behind this is, see if you can find white's next move. All right, well, if you had a chance to look at that, I'm going to say a lot of people probably said knight takes b3 check here. And this was kind of black's trick. They were setting this little trap. If you take here with check, it looks pretty good because it's like, okay, we take the pawn with check. If the king steps into this line, we're going to have another discover check with our knight. That looks pretty good. But black doesn't do that. They go king to c3. They avoid that. They're still threatening to get the queen. And what are you going to do now? You can't go check here. If you go check here or check here, let's just say, you lose your knight. And then you're going to lose, obviously. And the only other thing you could try would be to take this, but then black just gets a queen. and it looks like you might have a discover check here to win the queen back, but no, the king takes your knight. So it doesn't actually work, and that was black's trick, okay, going back to d2. So hopefully you didn't fall for that. The correct move is knight to e4 check. And it's not immediately obvious why you might want to go here, so let me explain it. First of all, black has to make a decision. They can either go this way, like to one of these two squares, to try to go for this plan of hiding over here, or they can go this way to try to attack the knight and potentially take the knight. Okay, that's kind of black's two options. So let's start with this one. If they try to run down the board this way, what are we going to do here if we're white? Well, check. The king can try to run. Check. And notice this is kind of the key. The knight is still able to help by coming into the d2 square, right? And now it doesn't matter what you do. If you come here, you walk into queen takes b3, and you actually get checkmated. And if you go to a1, then it's simply a draw because of the check. And the knight can just keep jumping back and forth here. And if you ever go up here, again, the knight just goes back and forth. There's nothing really. All right. So that's the idea, okay? Now, I just said after knight to e4, that's what happens if the king tries to run over here. But the other way that black can get tricky is go to king to e3, threatening to simply take the knight, and at the same time, you still have all of these pawns that you're threatening with to get another queen, right? So what do you do here if you're white? If you had a chance to look at that, you take the pawn on b3 now with check, and some of you are saying, but wait a second, the knight on e4 is going to be captured, right? No, because if you do that, you see what white's going to do? That's correct. Queen to b7. It's a skewer. Skewer is when the high value piece is in front, and then when it moves, you capture a lower value piece behind, and the queen is actually able to stop everything. And the reason it's able to stop everything, I should point out, is you can't really stop these guys like from getting a queen, but what you can do is constantly check the king. So for example, check, and the king has to move somewhere, and then check, and the king has to move, and you can keep checking forever and ever. There's no way for black to actually get away from the checks. You can play around with that position if you would like, but trust me, it is a draw. So that's the idea, and this is kind of the key feature of this study. By putting the knight on e4, it actually can't be taken by the king, because if it ever gets taken by the king, you always have a skewer where you win the queen. And so because of that, black is forced to just kind of dance around. And now what does white do? Get a chance to look, you just keep checking. You just keep checking. Remember, the king can never take, because if you take, again, there's a skewer. So you have to move, and the queen just keeps checking you essentially, right? That's, I guess, does it really matter? I think you c7, same idea. You can't take that. Wherever the king goes, you're going to just constantly check, right? Queen b6 check, and you can never get away from the checks. All right, so that was the secret. Going back to the beginning, you had to go to c5, then to e4. Don't fall for the trap here. And then your knight is essentially invincible to the king taking it, and you just keep checking forever with the queen. Pretty nice puzzle when you think about it. I don't think most people would find that in the middle of a game, but that's the only way to save the position. Congratulations if you found some of those moves. Hope you guys enjoyed that, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Stay sharp, play smart, take care.